for you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. That was a really nice introduction. So my talk today is going to be about positive emotion deficits, speaking of joy, in generalized anxiety disorder. So many people are probably familiar with generalized anxiety disorder, but just to recap, GAD is characterized by excessive uncontrollable worry across multiple areas of life for a long time that really interferes with people's lives. It has a 5% lifetime prevalence and is also characterized by deficits in emotion regulation as well as avoidance of emotion. And this is the piece that I'm going to zoom in on today. So many of us are probably also familiar with the tripartite model or the integrative hierarchical model, which talk about kind of the function of emotion in anxiety and depression. And this says that high negative affect is present in major depression as well as in GAD, whereas low positive affect is really only associated with major depression. But actually, recent findings from our lab have shown that GAD is associated with deficits in positive affect as well. And these are significant even when controlling for comorbid depression. So what I want to know is, why do we see these positive emotion deficits in GAD? And one possibility is the idea of dampening or the intentional suppression of positive emotion. Sherry has actually done a lot of work in this area and found it to be associated with people who are high in anxiety. An example of what a dampening response could look like is if somebody is experiencing, a lot of positive emotion, and then they might think, I don't deserve to feel good, or this feeling will never last. And I think that dampening also weaves in pretty nicely with GAD in another way, which comes from the contrast avoidance theory. So the contrast avoidance theory of GAD basically says that people with GAD have a strong desire to control their emotion. And specifically, they want to avoid a sudden shift from feeling really positive to all of a sudden feeling negative. And so in this theory, worry serves the function of upregulating negative affect, which actually would reduce the likelihood that somebody would experience a contrast. But I think that this theory actually has a gap with respect to positive emotion. And I think that's where dampening plays in. Perhaps dampening serves to downregulate positive affect in GAD in a similar kind of regulatory way to help an individual avoid the shift from positive to negative. So I'll give everyone an example that we can all relate to involving pizza. So imagine that a pizza is on its way and somebody feels very excited about the impending pizza that's about to happen, but they know that as soon as the pizza's gone, they're going to feel disappointed and maybe even guilty. And this represents a high emotional contrast from feeling excited, which is a high arousal positive emotion, to feeling disappointment or guilt, which is a negative emotion. So perhaps this person, knowing this, would employ dampening to downregulate this positive emotion. Maybe they would think, this pizza might not even be that good anyway, it'll be gone soon, and that would allow them to become more neutral, thereby reducing the possibility of a high contrast. Neutral to negative is a lower contrast, right, than positive to negative. So zooming out a little bit, why do we actually need to care about positive affect deficits in GAD? Well, we know that considering treatment outcomes for different anxiety disorders, GAD treatment outcomes lag behind the treatment outcomes for other disorders. And in fact, Erin and I recently published a case series in psychotherapy research that shows evidence for positive affect maybe actually gets worse in treatment. And that's a problem because we know from other studies that positive affect promotes resilience, coping, problem solving, all of which are very important to the ultimate goals of treatment for GAD. So my hope is that by kind of figuring out the mechanism of positive affect deficits, we can ultimately move toward better treatment outcomes. But first we have to clarify the mechanism. So my hypothesis that I'm proposing is that we've seen a relationship, right, between worry and low positive affect, and my hypothesis is that dampening is a mediator of that relationship. So to test this hypothesis, I looked at 96 high worry undergraduates from the research participation pool it turns out it's not very hard to find anxious undergrads here at Cal. And I recruited them based on a Penn State Worry Questionnaire score of 56, which is actually, compared to like a community sample, that's quite high, but studies have shown that that's a good cutoff for undergrad samples. My sample was 84 female participants, 31 were white, 43 were Asian American or Asian, and then the mean age was 19.6, so pretty young. And all of these participants came into the lab for a lab visit where they completed several cross-sectional measures, and then they completed a week of phone surveys where they completed measurements multiple times a day. The lab visit assessed a variety of constructs, so from worry to stress to depression, as well as affect evaluation, so the extent to which people value or want to experience different affective states, and dampening different responses to emotion. The phone surveys were 4 times a day for a week, so about 24 observations per person, and the surveys assessed worry, the extent to which it kind of interferes or is happening, as well as dampening, and an actual experienced affect. So the analysis I'm going to tell you about now focuses on the phone surveys. So it looks at each individual's time series of worry, dampening, and positive affect. But before I tell you about the model, I should probably fill you in on a little bit of scaffolding. So I'm in Aaron's lab, so we use SEM, structural equation modeling. And in this type of modeling, we can actually aggregate, instead of aggregating all the participants together, we can look within a single individual and aggregate across time. And we can look at, for example, the point-to-point stability of worry, dampening, and positive affect predicting themselves at the next time point. And I tested actually a LAG2 model, which allows you to look at worry, dampening, and positive affect predicting themselves at 2 back points in time. So you can also use a model like this to test a mediation hypothesis, where it would be worry predicting dampening at the following time point, predicting affect. And I also included the opposite direction because I actually don't know. But take these directional hypotheses and kind of bookmark them and put them in your back pocket. And just for a second, let's zoom out to a kind of broader level of analysis. SEM models can also tell you, they can allow you to test these paths for sure, but they also tell you about how well this structure that I'm sort of imposing, how well does this actually fit the actual dynamics or the way these constructs are really relating to each other across time within different people. So before we can even look at whether the mediation effect is happening, we have to make sure that the constructs that I'm interested in are actually relating to each other in a way that would even be representable in a model like this. So that's where I ran into something really interesting. My hope was that I would run this model in 96 people and I would get really great model fit for everyone, and then I could look at this mediation effect that I was interested in. But actually, the model only fit for 37 of the 96 people. So what that tells us is, for 59 people, these constructs, worry, dampening, and positive affect, aren't even relating to each other in that way. Perhaps dampening for those people isn't even really relating to worry and positive affect within time. That's one possibility. And if you were curious about the mediation path, of the 37 models that showed good fit, only 6 had the hypothesized mediation effect. But that's not really what I was interested in after having this finding. I wanted to know, why did the model fit well for some people and not for others? Are there group differences between the people in purple and the people in black that we could tap into? And that led me to another interesting observation that I made when I was working with these participants. So after they completed the lab visit and the phone surveys, I then debriefed people, which involved telling them about my hypotheses and talking to them about dampening and what it means. And I observed that a lot of individuals who identified as Asian actually said things like, in my culture, I was actually raised not to express when I feel proud or excited, so of course I dampen positive emotion. Another participant said, I don't want my roommate to see me acting all happy, that would be sort of culturally inappropriate. And another participant even noted that expressing positive affect feels almost like bragging. So that led me back to some theory that we heard about in colloquium a couple years ago when Jeannie Tsai came to talk to us. So this line of research conceptualizes affect on a circumplex, where there's an axis representing valence, so positive to negative, and another axis representing arousal, so high arousal positive and negative, and then low arousal. And Jeannie Tsai's research has actually shown that individuals who are more oriented toward Western culture, like in America or other cultures like that, we value these sort of high arousal positive states, excitement, enthusiasm. Whereas individuals who are more oriented to Eastern or Asian cultures tend to value low arousal positive states, like feeling peaceful, serene, or calm. And that led me to wonder, is culture actually predicting whether or not these models are fitting? Which again, just to remind everyone, that just means, model fit just means, are these constructs related in a way that I showed earlier. So I was able to then do logistic regression. I unfortunately did not have any hypotheses about culture going in, so I didn't have a measure of cultural orientation. So I was able to use ethnicity as kind of a proxy for culture, which I realize has its limitations. But I also looked at ideal affect. So the extent to which someone values low arousal, positive affect, I thought could be related to dampening because, just some of the observations I had made, people didn't want to express pride or excitement, so it seemed like the LAP or low arousal positive valuation could be involved. And it turned out it did. So LAP valuation interacted with Asian ethnicity to predict the odds of model fit. So what this means is for Asian individuals, a unit increase in valuing low arousal positive emotions led to significant increases in the odds that that model I had tested would fit their data. And I also got interested a little bit in breaking this down by nationality, so splitting up individuals who had identified as Asian American versus Asian of another nationality. So I found a significant effect there too, which was really interesting, and I would actually be really interested in talking to people offline if anyone has ideas about this. But I found that being Asian American specifically actually interacted with valuing low arousal positive emotion to predict odds of model fit, but that effect was not there for people who identified as, for example, Chinese or Japanese or Korean. So that was an interesting and unexpected finding. But zooming back out, what does this actually tell us with respect to my hypothesis about dampening as a mediator of worry and positive emotion? Well, at the nomothetic level, given that my model only even fit and was appropriate for 37 people, there's not really evidence to support this. But at the idiographic or person-specific level, there is some evidence to support it. In 6 people, they did have the kind of paths I thought they would, but it's worth zooming in on individuals, maybe specifically Asian individuals who value LAP emotions, to see if there is a cultural piece that we might be missing here. So some other possible explanations for why I had this set of findings. I think one thing that is really coming into play is the time scale of measurement. So remember that people filled out these phone surveys that I used to run those models. They filled them out 4 times a day, about every 4 hours. But maybe these constructs are actually varying at a rate that is either faster or slower than is able to be tapped into by that frequency of measurement. So it's possible, someone experiences worry and then right away they dampen and then right away they have changes in affect, or maybe it's slower. I don't really know. It's also possible, and I haven't thought too much about this piece, but again, I'd be very interested if other people have ideas or thoughts. I'm assuming that dampening is like a top-down intentional process, but it's entirely possible that it occurs for these more bottom-up, unintentional reasons. So maybe networks like in the reward sensitivity areas, or something in the brain, in the wet stuff, that's actually causing dampening of these processes to occur. Uh-oh. Whoops.
Maybe try wiggling your fingers.
Okay, I'm wiggling it. I know, it's almost over. And so the last thing is, it's also possible that there's individual differences in our lab, individual differences kind of rule the day. There's a lot of idiosyncrasy in how people experience these different constructs. And so maybe the function of dampening is different for different people. In fact, it probably is. So future directions, obviously a good first step is going to be to replicate this in a more diverse, more representative sample and see if this holds up with more and different people. I'm also really interested in including a cultural orientation measure in the future so that I can really tap into and disentangle the effect of culture versus ethnicity versus, affect valuation in predicting all of these processes. I also think it'll be really important to look at different time intervals. So doing momentary assessment, not just 4 times a day, but maybe also, faster, slower, looking at how that relates to this. I'm thinking more about the bottom-up approach to dampening. I don't know as of yet what that might look like. I don't have a whole lot of specific ideas about that just yet, but that is something that in the future I want to move more into thinking about. So thanks everyone. Specifically my lab, my advisor Erin, my lab mates John, Allie, and Peter, my RAs, some of whom are here and helped me with the study, and my tiny cohort, John, as well as everyone else here for being supportive and wonderful.
So we have time for questions, and yeah, perfect. We want student questions first. So.
Great talk, Hannah. Very engaging. A couple of clarifying questions. With your URAP participants, they all met that threshold for anxiety, so there were no comparison in that particular group, right?
Right, exactly. All the undergrads, there were 96 of them. They were above the mean cutoff of 56.
Would you expect, so your initially hypothesized model, would you expect that to be the same with, let's say, typically developing individuals, or is it something that's more specific to ADHD, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do think that in people that don't have anxiety or high anxiety, I don't think that the sort of dampening mediation path would really be there. What I had kind of hoped to do is find a mediation effect in the anxious people and then compare them maybe to see if it were, because of anxiety. But since worry is kind of, I'm hypothesizing and still haven't gotten good answers to this quite yet, but I think worry drives a lot of these processes, like dampening and contrast avoidance. So I think that if you're lower in worry, these things wouldn't play out as much. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
That was terrific, but capital T.
Thank you.
So I had a question about the dampening. At different points you talked about, I thought I heard you say dampening of experience, and then in the anecdotes that you shared from some of the participants, it was dampening the outward expression or display. So
Yeah.
And I suspect that in the daily reports it was dampening of experience, but I don't know. So I'm just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what you measured and then your thoughts about the dampening experiences versus the expression.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the EMA, where I was kind of representing dampening as this circle, that was the dampening subscale of the response to positive affects measure, which asks questions in an 8-item, that subscale has 8 items, and it's things like, when I feel happy, I tend to think I don't deserve this. I tend to consciously, now I'm kind of blanking on what all the other items are, but it's more kind of an intentional top-down experiential thing. And I think that your question about display, and specifically different display rules in different cultures, how that could play in, that's something Aya and I were talking about yesterday, because it's definitely seems that there's some sort of difference between, oh yeah, it's really inappropriate to express pride at getting an A on a test to my roommate, but maybe internally I still feel proud, I just don't express it. So, but given that I use the response to positive affect measure, which I think does sort of have an interpersonal component to it, I imagine that they're related but dissociable, if that makes sense. So it would be interesting in the future to kind of look at whether or not someone's orientation toward the social anxiety component versus the contrast avoidance component is I'm really glad you asked. So one thing that I'm not sure about, but that I sort of hypothesize, is that when I conceptualize affect here, I use the PANAS short form, and those are all high arousal positive affect items. So I wonder if maybe individuals who are oriented to Asian culture would actually be more likely to dampen high arousal positive emotions, but individuals who are oriented to Western culture would maybe dampen low arousal positive emotions. Just anecdotally, another participant in the story who did not appear to be affiliated with Asian culture said to me, you know, I can't allow myself to get calm because then I'll get complacent. I'll fail a test if I'm calm. So that's just an anecdote. But I wonder if maybe the specific type of affect with respect to arousal level would predict like the type or flavor of dampening that would happen. It's a really good question.
Lovely talk and really interesting developing line of research here. So it seems like you do have some interesting data on the cultural punch, but it also sounds like 37 participants fit the model. You only had like 45 folk or so who came from minority.
Mm-hmm.
And there are probably, it sounds like doing the numbers, a bunch of folk who don't fit the model and don't fall into the culture piece.
Right.
So I'm searching for another sort of possible explanation.
Right.
And the kind of examples that you're giving reminds me of Adrian Wells's research. You know, often the research that's the leading research in Britain doesn't cross the ocean. But it was, at least when I was in Britain, the leading sort of theory of GAD. And it was a metacultative theory of the beliefs that people with GAD have about worry. And he's got measures, and I just wonder if you're touching on another angle, like his is all about positive and negative beliefs about worry, but you might be touching on that GAD is also associated with some negative beliefs about positive emotion. So just to throw it out there that might be really worth checking out. Just all of the examples you're giving sound exactly like that kind of metacultative theory that he's got. So
I'll absolutely look into that. Thank you so much. It's really cool.
So, very similar to what you're saying, is it possible that the dampening serves to reduce the future worry? Because I'm thinking of that client that we've talked about a lot that I had, where he thinks about getting excited about the new car, and he can't get excited because he remembers that in the past he got excited and then the car breaks down, and he wants to avoid that and all the worry that it caused. So did you try flipping your model around at all to see if maybe there's any decreased future worry?
Yeah, you know, I would expect, so I tested the other direction of the paths as well, and I haven't yet really broken down, you know, which people had which direction, or for the well-fitting models, what function did dampening serve? Is it more kind of this way or that way? I'm gesturing about my like mediation versus the other. I'm like weird. Yeah, no, but I think that is really, it's a definite potential thing that could be happening for some people, and I think it's another one of those things where individual differences might, like for some people, I bet that is the case. Maybe for other people it goes in the other direction. Yeah, really interesting.
I think the discovery of the control component and the implications of whether or not the empathy you're talking about is more likely to be a bottom-up or top-down process.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, I haven't really thought about that. I guess it's possible. I mean, since we know that different cultures value affect differently, and different cultures maybe show differences in whether they dampen or not, that might speak to it being more top-down and intentional, but I also don't really know. That's definitely interesting to kind of disentangle that in the future.
That was a great talk. So I have two pieces. First, did you feed a dog a lot of pizzas?
You'd be amazed if you just Google hug and then fill in the blank, you're gonna find it all.
There was no animal torture involved. There was really just a comment that in this era of everybody being so worried about replicability and whether hypotheses are a priori I thought this was just a beautiful example of following the data and being honest that you're telling a post hoc story in a way that any audience member would follow and say, great, I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, I had the same reaction, but when I was looking, I was thinking, you know, this is like a teaching moment. I think you have a really strong case for rejecting your hypothesis. I think you have very good data that dampen. I'm going to accept the fact that it may not be well measured. Let's just say that it's measured okay. I think this is, you know, a very strong study suggesting this theory is wrong. And although sometimes you can resurrect it by going through these permutations of looking at, you know, left-handed people in their insurance offices, and you're not quite doing that, but you're using a lot of, you're getting into 3 and 4 factor interactions, you know, and questioning not only your measure of damping, but also your measure of affect. So I guess the question I had, kind of like what Sherry was saying, but at what point do you walk away from this and say, this is wrong, I'm going to go after a different explanatory model, and at what point do you continue to sort of kind of resurrect this idea by going down what, you know, someone might say is probably at best not a very broad path.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. It's something I've actually been recently, Erin and I have talked about it, I've been sort of, you know, grappling with what are my next steps. And I think that what I'm going to do next, because I think you're exactly right, you know, the hypothesis that I kind of came into this with is not supported, you know. I think I'm actually going to take a step away from looking at dampening in anxiety, and I'm actually just going to look at dampening itself and look at maybe the relationship, irrespective of anxiety or worry or the mediation path, look at how culture and valued affect plays into someone's dampening response to positive affect.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The two things that are really hard to measure and you get good sampling in our situation are psychopathology and culture.
Yeah.
And both of them play such an important role. The chances of you ever replicating anything seem to be really slim.
Yeah, definitely.